Welcome to the Domain Name Wire podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Alleman, and this is episode number 539. Back on episode 447 of this podcast, that was in August 2023, I interviewed Brett Farmiloe about his company's rebrand from Terkel to Featured, including the acquisition of the domain featured.com. It had only been a few weeks since the change, so Brett is on the show again today to talk about the impact this upgrade has had on his business after nearly 2 years. And Featured made another bold move recently. It acquired Help a Reporter Out, commonly known as HARO. We talk about how that opportunity came about and what Featured's plans are for the service. First, a word from our sponsor. Our sponsor this week is Salve.com and its low-cost backordering. Unlike other expired domain backordering services, they don't start prices at $59 or higher. Right now, it's just $10.49 to backorder a .com domain at Salve. That's the same price they charge for new registrations. Recent catches include ledtherapy.com, nomad.dev, and sxn.org. Plus, when you create your Salve.com account, you can take advantage of low fees on all of your domain names, such as those new .coms for $10.49. Sign up for an account today at salve.com/DNW/backorder. That's sav.com/DNW/backorder. Well, normally at this point in the show, I run through some news from the domain business over the past week, but I was traveling last week for my College IQ business, so I recorded this early. I did write about the industry, though, so just go to domainnamewire.com to see that. But now, let's chat with Brett. My guest this week is Brett Farmiloe. He is the founder of Featured. Brett, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me back.
So Brett was on the show back on episode 447. That was in August 2023. If anyone wants to go back and listen to that, you had just changed the name of your company, a big upgrade. It was previously Terkel, right? Am I pronouncing that right?
You nailed it.
Terkel on Terkel.io, and you upgrade to featured.com, which was a big upgrade. Before we talk about that now, a couple years later, and what that has done for your company, tell people what Featured does.
Yeah, Featured connects journalists with sources for stories. And so on one side of the network, you have experts who are answering journalist queries because they want to build visibility and credibility. And on the other side, you have journalists who need to connect with sources and feature them in their articles.
Okay. Yeah. So I've used Featured a couple of times for stories on Domain Name Wire. And those have been usually kind of roundups asking people who have either changed their domain name or who've used a new top-level domain, that sort of thing, to talk about their experience. So it was super easy for me because I could just say, this is what I'm looking for. Featured then collected all these different quotes and even put them into an edited document for me, which made it super easy to publish a story. So there are corporate sites that use it, right? There's
a bunch of different use cases on the publisher side or the journalist side. And so you see brands with blogs who want to get free high quality content for their site. And they could do that just by asking a question on Featured. And we'll invite vetted experts to answer that question. We'll turn it up into a roundup article. And then the publishers can feature that on their site. And then the use case that you mentioned as well, where you could essentially find one or two really interesting folks and feature their insights in an article or on a podcast. And the way that people want to be featured in the media is changing, and we're trying to evolve with that.
What are some publishers that use the service?
We've got media companies like Fast Company. We've got brands with blogs like GoDaddy. GoDaddy's been one of our longtime great partners. And then you've got like even associations that want to feature members and prospective members on their sites. So like the Society for Human Resource Management and others. So at the end of the day, I think that high quality content goes a long way. And in the 2025 and the age of AI, human content goes one level above where generative can go. And so it's been pretty interesting to see that evolution.
With AI coming out, I imagine that's had a pretty big impact on people wanting to get that original content out there, which you can help them do. Now, as a publisher, I didn't pay anything to use the service. How do you make money?
Yeah, so it's a freemium B2B SaaS business model where experts pay to answer questions. For our free plan, you could answer 3 questions a month at no cost. We have a light plan that allows you to answer up to 10 questions a month for $19. We've got a pro plan. It's $49 a month. It has unlimited submissions. And then we have our business plan that's $99 a month. you not only could submit answers to questions, but you could also author byline articles and pitch those to publications who have opted into featured.
So on the expert side here, I assume you have individuals, like I could respond to things there, but you also have a lot of agencies managing clients.
Yeah. So I ran a marketing agency for 10 years, and the personas are those marketing agencies. They're the in-house marketing teams, and then they're the do-it-yourself small business owners that don't want to pay an agency and would rather to do it themselves. And so the platform democratizes that access to media.
Okay. When you came on the show back in 2023, you had just rebranded as Featured and using the domain name featured.com. As I mentioned, the old brand was at Terkel.io. So I think my listeners can appreciate that was a pretty big upgrade, but it had been just a few weeks since you had done the upgrade when you came on the show last time. So first of all, let's talk about your growth since then. At the time, you boasted about 550 publishers and 20,000 experts. How do those numbers look now?
Probably about north of 5x.
Oh, wow. Wow. On both of those. So we're talking like maybe 2,500 publishers and around 100,000 experts on the platform now?
Yeah, probably even more on the expert side, but publisher side, that's accurate.
Wow. Okay. And talk to me about the kind of the benefits you got here from changing the domain, upgrading the domain.
I think that there's the qualitative and the quantitative. I think the quantitative would be just how much easier it is to succeed online with a premium.com versus a brand new.io. It just allows you as a founder to think of strategies that can actually work. A great example of that is a recent launch of expert pages. And so expert pages are essentially an alternative to a LinkedIn profile designed specifically to help demonstrate your media expertise. Within 24 hours, our traffic doubled overnight. We began to see some of our expert pages outrank LinkedIn profiles. It just is a testament to search engines' belief in featured.com as the strength of the domain. So I think that's a really good quantitative example of, oh, traffic doubled overnight. Oh, you were able to execute a strategy and it worked. The qualitative stuff is really around, hey, when we reach out to a publisher with a proposition to partner together, to work together, which email are you going to be more receptive to? And which one are you going to, as an internal champion, want to take to your team and say, hey, we should partner with these guys? And so I think that's the qualitative thing that we've seen a lot more traction, where it's just been an exponential leap from where we were before.
Last time you were on the show, you talked about that scenario where maybe you get someone on board. They're like, yeah, this is exciting. But then they bring it to their team and their team's like,
Terkel?
Yeah, exactly. Who is this we're partnering with? Are they going to be here in a year? As opposed to this is featured, they're featured.com, that sort of thing. So I want to clarify on those expert pages, were those around on Terkel.io or was no? Okay.
No, it was a pipe dream. And when we rebranded to Featured, we invested pretty heavily as well in the brand itself. I think that's probably one of the most common things that we hear from people when they evaluate us versus some other sites in the space is they just like the brand. And so I think that you just check all the boxes as, take away all the excuses not to work together. You got a good domain, good brand, good value proposition, clear all the hurdles so that internal champion can feel confident in working with you.
Did you run into any search engine issues when you changed the domain name?
No, I think that, like I mentioned, I'd run a marketing agency for 10 years and had gone through quite a few different domain name transitions and have used that change of ownership tool in Google Search Console. And so I think that this one was pretty seamless to do. It's not like we had a whole bunch of search equity tied up into Terkel.io. That was pretty easy to flip the switch.
How long had you been running on Terkel.io before?
About a year and a half or so. Yeah, we launched in January of 22, bought featured.com and rebranded, I think in July of 23, somewhere around there.
Okay, yeah. You were on the show in August of 2023, so that lines up. So basically, you're saying at that point in time, you didn't have a whole lot of search traffic coming to it. You didn't have a massive amount of pages. Obviously, you didn't have these expert feature pages at the time, too. And so it wasn't that big of a deal. The other thing is you still had Terkel.io, right? So you could forward it And then I imagine you just forwarded the email addresses. Do you still forward the email addresses?
Yeah, I still kept them because I think and I still get quite a bit of inbound stuff to, Brett at Terkel.io, to some of our other stuff. So yeah, I think that it's a pretty low cost way to just keep the domain going and make sure you don't miss anything.
There have been circumstances where companies have been forced to change domains because they had to relinquish it because of a court type thing. And that's where things get really hairy. But I think that shows too, there are also times when companies, let's say the domain they're using is more valuable than their business, or maybe they're using it for personal email. And one of the things they might want to negotiate as part of a deal, if they sell that domain, is to continue getting their email addresses that they had before.
Yeah, that actually did happen to me because I sold my marketing agency. And it's been a huge hassle because luckily a couple of the team members remained after the acquisition, and one of them was monitoring my email, would forward stuff over for the old email address. But I still get emails like that. And I think that my email address is still active at the old agency. So yeah, I could sign off on that.
Yeah, and we're talking, that was what, 4 years ago when you sold that? Maybe even.
Yeah, a little over 4 years ago, December of 21.
Yeah. So Featured is doing great. You've got 2,500 publishers, maybe over 100,000 experts. It's grown significantly since you did this brand change, this upgrade. And just to clarify too, I think we talked last time, you bought this domain for kind of a mid 6-figure range, including some equity. Is that right?
Yeah, I'd say lower 6 figures. But yeah, that's all settled up. We've got full ownership of it.
Okay. And at the time we recorded that, you also said you had raised about $1.7 million in funding at the time. So now this interesting opportunity came up, I guess, earlier this year, late last year, where you made an acquisition, and this has then changed your business significantly again, or allowed it to grow significantly. Tell me about it.
Yeah. So we acquired and revived Help a Reporter Out, or HARO. And so I think HARO was founded in 2008. It was acquired in 2010. It ran for 14 years. It was rebranded in April 24 from Help a Reporter Out to Connectively. And then Connectively was announced to be discontinued in December of 24. And so that's the timeline.
So for those that aren't familiar, Help a Reporter was the original service that connected journalists and sources. And it was a big deal. In fact, I modeled my podcastguest.com business that I sold a few years ago off of Help a Reporter Out. It was basically HARO for podcasts. And it is a big deal. It was a big deal too. So Peter Shankman was I guess a journalist at the time, or a PR guy who founded it. And it just grew like crazy. He sold it a couple of years later, as you mentioned. And then, like you said, it got acquired, but then that company merged with another company, Cision, and it probably didn't get the love it should have anymore. And however, people still used it a lot. And it's like Google shutting down, when they shut down Google Reader, right? Everyone was still using it, and it was frustrating, and they had to go somewhere else, like Featured, they could go to. But it was brilliant to then just buy that. So talk to me about how that happened, because they announced the change to Connectively, and then they announced that I was shutting down. They were just, again, I guess to the company, it wasn't that big of a deal because they're a major PR media conglomerate. So how did this come about?
So when I saw that Connectively was going to be discontinued, I just reached out to the general support at connectively.us email address and said, hey, we're interested. Whoever's getting this, forward it to the right person, and let's have an exploratory chat. And we took it from there. From that email to the time of acquisition, it was probably like 3.5, 4 months. And I would say that in my limited amount of experience in doing acquisitions, this one was relatively straightforward and pretty simple. Initially, I think that we were most interested in the domains. So helpareporter.com has a tremendous amount of history attached to it. So we were most interested in that. And then ultimately just acquired enough of the assets that would allow us to actually revive the brand. And to your point, this is such a unique brand. People have had some really pivotal life moments attached to this brand. It might have been the first time they've ever been featured. Or I've read stories and heard stories about how a business was on its last legs and then they got featured in the Wall Street Journal and it saved their company. I've heard from journalists that they've been able to get connected with sources that they've never imagined. I spoke with one journalist last week that got connected to Jane Goodall through HARO. And it's like, yeah, it's not like she's was reading the 3 times a day email, but that's the power of it. It's a so simple service that just by sending 3 emails a day with different requests from journalists, so many people receive these and forward it on to the right person. And that's what makes it actually work. So yeah, it's been a pretty incredible thing.
Yeah, a lot of times people read stories like in the Wall Street Journal, and they interview 3 people who maybe had student loans who got a reprieve when that was paused, and now they're trying to make ends meet, that sort of thing. And you're probably like, how does that journalist find these people? How do they locate people in this unique situation? And a lot of times it's HARO, right? They put out something like this. Sometimes they can do it on social media, but HARO is just an easier way for them to do that. Probably especially when they're trying to find like business owners and that sort of thing, because a lot of them have agencies that are monitoring this, that sort of thing. But what are some examples of queries that might go out on HARO?
I'll tell you. So we see it all. We see hey, I'm looking for a business owner who might have been impacted by this worldwide event, and I need someone to speak on my podcast about it. Stuff like that. Yesterday, it was the craziest thing. There was a source request for a professional witch. And I'm monitoring the support inbox for HARO right now. And I get this inbound email from a professional witch. And she was like, hey, I got forwarded the email. I don't know how to respond. Can you re-forward the thing to me? And so I re-forwarded it to her and they got connected. And like, that's the power of HARO is you put anything out there and you can get connected with anyone really, really quickly.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the one that came out this morning. There are someone looking for an expert on this Canadian entertainment tax credit. There's something about credit cards, medical experts needed for side effects of Plavix, something about Tamiflu. So it's really just all over the board, the types of things that come through here. And like this particular media outlet is parade.com, which is a big publication. I know. So since you've acquired HARO, I've used it on a couple of occasions, and listeners to this podcast who also read Domain Name Wire probably saw a couple articles I did about companies that changed their domain name recently, why they decided they needed to change it, the headaches that came along with that, and that sort of thing. And those were actually sourced from Helper Reporter. So that kind of shows the power of it. I just submitted a simple query, and I probably got, 15 pitches, and I'll have more stories in that series. 3 or 4 of them were really solid. The other ones were fine. They just were a little repetitive and that sort of thing. So that kind of shows the power of this. And there have been lots of copycat. Featured in a lot of ways.
Yeah, totally.
The same idea, right?
Look, like HARO's so simple that it's got its weaknesses. It's got its shortcomings. It was founded in 2008 and it's still existing in its same format in 2025. The problems with it is like you might put in a request and you might need a source immediately, but the next HARO email comes out in 4 hours. So there's a 4-hour delay. And so that's where Featured can pick up the gaps, is we're a platform where we are doing cross-posting from HARO over to Featured so that Featured users are able to immediately jump on those queries and help that journalist out. So I think that there's definitely shortcomings with HARO, but the strength of it is the sheer size and helpfulness of the community.
And so you said you originally wanted to buy the domain names, and then you ended up buying enough to revive it. So customer lists, domains,
trademarks, social assets.
Right. Included in the social media account, I guess on X has over 100,000.
Yeah,
followers?
I think it's about 115,000 followers there. So we'll put out urgent queries from journalists onto X, and that's been a great distribution channel too.
Was this a competitive process then? I know you said you cold outreach to the company, but I assume other people did too?
Yep. I think that from my knowledge, there were multiple offers, multiple people who were interested in acquiring Help Reporter out. So I think it goes back to the mission that Featured has been on and how committed we are to that. And so really tried to lean into that with the discussions we had with the seller. And fortunately, they selected us.
So talk to me now. You've got Help a Reporter out. The business model is all ad supported. I think they have one other business model for a little while, but there's basically an ad at the top of each of these newsletters. And then you have Featured, which you talked about is on that freemium model where you can respond to more inquiries if you pay. So talk to me about, are you keeping these as 2 separate services? How are you looking at that?
Yeah, 2 separate services, 2 different business models. And I think that the coverage on it appeases most journalists in terms of what they're looking for. So HARO is entirely free for both sides. Newsletter ad supported. And I think that's really important for some journalists because they want to be able to feature virtually any source and not have any kind of compensation, get in the way of it. And so that's the weakness of the featured business model is there's some people paying, some people who aren't. At the end of the day, they all land in the journalist inbox and the best pitch wins. But I think that some journalists do have a fundamental issue with that business model. So HARO is a great alternative to featured for that. And at the same time, featured does a lot of things that HARO can't. There's a lot of tech that we've layered onto it to match experts and those queries with the journalists to fulfill those needs.
Well, do you ever think that will you use technology to improve the HARO experience?
Here's one of the main reasons why I wanted to pursue this acquisition is because HARO has product market fit. And when you have something with product market fit, you don't want to mess too much with it. So that's the mentality with HARO. We know that some of the issues that plagued it and led to its discontinuation was really around quality and trust. It became too easy to essentially spam journalists via HARO queries. And so that's the number one thing that we've been super focused on out the gate is how do we reinforce trust? How do we restore quality at every step of the way? But fundamentally, from a system perspective, matching people via an email newsletter works.
Yeah, it really does. It's just funny you mentioned the challenges that they face. Same thing with podcastguest.com, right? I would have people submitting to podcasts, the same pitch to each podcast, even if they weren't qualified for it, that sort of thing. So I had to just monitor it. But again, the email, it's just so simple. And even when I created my request a couple of weeks ago on HARO, I didn't need to log in. I just filled out a form and then it went out and then I got the responses in my inbox and there was a way I know they were filtered through, right? I think you guys do an initial filter, but there was a way if I did get one that was off base, I could report it and then you guys can take care of it, that sort of thing. So the simplicity of it I think it was the magic, right? It was the brilliance of the platform to begin with.
Yeah, and it makes it so accessible for so many people. I think that we've been really, really surprised at the enthusiasm that people have embraced the return with. So I'm looking forward to, what the next 2 years look like with it.
Talk to me a little bit because there is this window where the service was shut down, right? In fact, I remember going to it earlier this year to use it. I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot. I can't believe they shut that thing down. Is there any sort of work in reviving it? Or
here's the craziest thing that happened when we were about to revive it. So we needed to test whether or not the website would go live. And so we launched a website on helperreporter.com on a Friday afternoon at 3:30. And we launched it. And in 2 minutes, there was 15 signups. And it hadn't been live in over a year. And we said, like this news isn't supposed to be out yet. You don't want to have people, and my mind was blown that somehow, and we had spam detection and stuff like that. So it wasn't like bot activity and stuff. Like people legit signed up for the service within 2 minutes of us launching a website with a website non-existent for over a year on a Friday afternoon. So yeah, we took the site down and waited until we officially announced it on that Tuesday or whatever. But I think that in terms of reviving it, it's the challenge has really been around that quality and trust issue, but flicking the switch and allowing the service to continue, I can't believe how easy our team has made that in terms of the legwork that they've done. And we're lucky because a lot of people have entered back into this with the same expectations of the old HARO. And so it's like, look, this is month one for us. Like we're just getting going on it. Like be patient, but people's expectations are pretty high, surprisingly, for a free service.
Excellent. Well, congrats on the acquisition. And it's obviously everyone listening to the show is excited to hear that the featured and featured.com domain is working out for you. But I have a feeling this acquisition will be even more impactful to your business when we talk again in a couple of years. So congratulations.
I hope. Thanks for having me on the show. And yeah, it's great to continue to add chapters to this story. I'm looking forward to seeing where we go.
All right. My guest this week has been Brett Farmiloe. He is the founder of Featured. You can check out featured.com and then helperreporter.com is where the HARO site is. That's a wrap on this week's Domain Name Wire podcast. You can listen to all previous episodes at dnw.com/podcast or on your favorite podcast app. Thanks for listening.